When it comes down to it, our short-term memories are very feeble. If I were to just give you a number to memorize, like this one, and it flashed on screen for like 2 seconds, would you be able to remember every digit that popped up? Probably not. But now, let's say I made it into a jingle, like something that's really catchy, and then I split the numbers up into these different chunks. So they're just chunks of 3 to 4 numbers, and then you attach those numbers together. What do you get? Well, you end up getting an annoyingly catchy song.
877-393-4448. Optimum online, so fast, so fine. Dial up and the you gonna leave it behind. Come on, me head there, let's get online. 29.95, it'll blow your mind.
877-393-4448.
Sure, maybe you can repeat the digits really quickly in your head and you'll remember the numbers as long as you're actively repeating them. You're just saying them over and over again, like 2468, 2468, something like that. But if I were to ask you tomorrow, you probably wouldn't be able to remember them. That's because it's part of your short-term memory and you didn't really have time to consolidate or strengthen that memory in your brain. So there's no neural connections there anyway for your neurons to just hook onto. When you want to make something memorable, like let's say a phone number, we tend to repeat them back to a person in chunks of 3 to 4 digits. So for example, my phone number would be 201. There's actually a study that found that chunking in terms of information, phone numbers, that's super helpful for ensuring that you can retain information a lot more easily, because chunks are more easier to work with than large pieces of information. So when you're going to eat, for example, it'd be a lot harder to eat if you're just like cramming an entire stack of pancakes into your mouth at once. Unless you're a really good speed eater, I guess, but even then, chunks are pretty much everywhere when you think about it. You might think back to an annoying jingle that you might have heard on the radio where the music is super catchy. The Cars for Kids one, for example, KARS, Cars for Kids. No, they're not sponsoring this video, but just an example of an earworm. As you can see, creating chunks is a very great way of helping you consolidate things into your memory. While these chunks can start out small, in different fields, what you'll notice is that those little chunks of information can become bigger and bigger and bigger. And what happens is that as a result of those chunks getting larger, you're able to better interconnect those. You can essentially just say, these are where the connections are, and then once you relate those together, you strengthen your memory. And initially, while you may think of things in terms of chunks, what you'll notice is that after enough time, you won't even realize that those were chunks to begin with. Like the line kind of blurs because you don't have to consciously think of it in these bits anymore, but rather it's just one fluid thing. So for my own phone number, when I was trying to learn it, I had to think about it in terms of chunks. So this was the first set of numbers, then there's the next set of numbers, then there's the final set of numbers. And if someone needs my phone number, I don't have to actively think in blocks. I could just say my phone number off the top of my head. It doesn't have to be as much of a mental process. Your brain has pretty much formed the neural connections needed so that it's not so much of a foreign thing to it anymore. The more you recall how these chunks work together, the easier it becomes for you to sort of consolidate that information and then have it in your long-term memory. And so that's just how chunks work. Everything can be broken down into smaller bits of information. Anything can be broken down into chunks. Now the next thing. The next thing I'm going to talk about relates sort of to procrastination. It is super easy to just get on your phone and just start scrolling Twitter or Instagram. It's super easy to get distracted. Like you're watching this YouTube video right now. Was it recommended to you? Do you really need to watch this video right now? Yes, you do, because I'm teaching you how to not procrastinate. So watch this video to avoid procrastinating, unless you're procrastinating by watching this video, which would be whenever you're trying to learn something, there's always this hidden enemy that's just out to get you, and that's procrastination. Maybe you'll be doing some work and then you get a text message notification or a messenger notification or a DM on Twitter or Instagram, and you just feel like, oh, has my crush texted me back? Moving on. So these notifications, what they do is that they essentially they break your focus. And in a way, you just sort of lose whatever momentum that you were building up when you were working on a single thing. How can we combat procrastination? Well, it's actually a really simple mind shift. All you need to do is just shift your frame of mind. Now, why do we procrastinate? Well, you procrastinate because when you're tasked to do something or you're trying to get something done, your mind is thinking about the product. And when you're thinking about the product, what ends up happening is that you just start to dread it a lot more. And this happens when you sort of focus on product over process. Because when you focus on product and you need to get this done, you need to finish this report, you need to finish writing that last chapter of your novel, the next great American novel, it's going to be a lot more difficult because literally the pain centers in your brain are being fired off every time you think about the product, the thing that you need to complete. If you have a large to-do list, you look at those things on those to-do lists sometimes and you're just like, no, I can't do it. There's just too much. I just didn't get anything done, even though you've been spending so much time on this one task, but not being able to check off that thing on your list is kind of frustrating and also is an easy way of burning yourself out. And then as a result of that pain, what you end up doing is you look towards alternatives that are a lot less discomforting. You don't have to worry about the pain if you just avoid the pain in the first place, if you avoid the task that you're meant to do. And it's much easier to just go down the slide, if you will, where one thing leads to another, where you keep finding alternatives that take your mind off the thing at hand. Your alternative might be watching a YouTube video, but this video is important, so stay until the end. You made the right decision by stopping by my channel. So, and if you haven't liked the video yet, be sure to give it a like. If you're watching this far and you find this information useful, also subscribe. It's free. You can always unsubscribe later if you want. And yeah. What you don't realize is that by putting off the work until later, you're basically delaying the pain that you're feeling, and then you're just going to feel even more dread, and your pain centers are going to be even more activated in a sense, because you're just going to dread it even more. You're just going to feel like, oh my god, no, now there's a looming deadline, now there's something else I have to do, there's some hidden variables that I forgot to account for, and now there's just a lot more on your plate, and that is going to cause you to want to procrastinate even more. And so your brain is selfish in a way. It wants to preserve itself, it wants to feel good, it doesn't want to feel discomfort. Survival mechanisms. And so you'll be a lot more anxious if you push things off till later. And so that's why procrastination tends to be very difficult. Now, I mentioned specifically that this is because of a product-oriented mindset. What you need to do is, instead of focusing on prioritizing do this thing and get that thing done, what you need to do instead is do something like, I'm going to spend a half an hour today on math homework, or that problem set, or an hour of practicing guitar, or give it my all, go in full focus, and then afterwards I'm going to just take like a mini break, and then I'll return and do a few more cycles of this. And so by saying stuff like, I'm going to spend this much time rather than I'm going to get this thing done, that's a very subtle kind of shift, but it makes a world of a difference. A time goal is a lot more achievable focus-wise than just getting something done, because once you look back, maybe some things that you're trying to do may take a really long time to accomplish, and so there's no alternative but to just put in the hours that you need. And so process-based actions have actually been shown to help you improve your productivity. Setting yourself time goals And so you're sort of building that momentum for yourself. And this is the basis of the Pomodoro method, which is an amazing thing that you should try if you haven't heard of it already. The Pomodoro technique was pioneered by Francesco Cirillo, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. Basically, what you're doing with the Pomodoro technique is that you set a timer for 25 minutes. And during those 25 minutes, you'll just be working with full focus, your full attention on that one thing, spending 25 minutes, pure focus. And then after the timer goes off, what you get to do is you take a mini 5-minute break. And after you take your 5-minute break, you get back into the swing of pure focus, 25 minutes, you keep going. By taking these short bursts of activity, you're able to get a lot more done because you're also giving yourself a little bit of time to just relax. You don't have to study ham for like an hour to get results. You can take it, chunk it. You can chunk those study sessions up and get a lot more done as a result. So the third method to really effectively learn anything is to use the idea of active recall. Have you ever tried to teach someone something or explain something to them only to find that you're not really doing a good job at it and it's just really difficult to sort of get your point across? Well, that is really due to the fact that you probably don't understand the subject as well as you think you do. And so what ends up happening is that maybe you find that you're not able to really explain it well enough. And so the reason why that happens is because you don't really have as good of a grasp on the subject as you think you do. And so the way to combat this is to use active recall. Active recall is a way of just testing yourself. When you recall what you've learned, you're basically testing your ability to remember it, right? You're basically testing your understanding of something, because if you understand something really well, you're going to be able to recall it much more easily. If you don't really understand something as well, what ends up happening is you're just going to end up at a loss for words, essentially. And so that is the process of active recall, and that's the mechanism that we're exploiting when we want to learn something. When you actively recall concepts, tough ideas that you're trying to learn, or you quiz yourself by using something like flashcards, for example, you're really getting yourself into that mindset of forming more neural connections that allows you to associate these different pieces of information that you're learning, and that can really go a long way. And so by testing yourself repeatedly, you're able to pick up on like the details, the small bits of information that you need. And with those bits, you can slowly start to accumulate an associative type of knowledge, because once you start to relate these small ideas that you've essentially picked up here and there, connecting them all together solidifies it even better. And so sometimes you can't really get an understanding of a field or a subject without knowing some basic principles about that thing. And so what you need to do in that sense is that you need to spend a little bit more time picking up that information, and then you can start to associate those discrete facts together. So in this way, you can get a lot of different topics and concepts to stick. By using active recall, you're able to just go off the memory and just say, okay, do I really know this? If you don't know it, that's fine. You could just look at the answer again and then later test yourself again, and you'll find that you remember a lot more than you would think that you would know. And a really cool program that allows you to do this sort of active recall is you can use Anki, and I'm going to link it in the description. So you can use a software like Anki or just make physical flashcards with questions on them, and basically by resurfacing these ideas and resurfacing these concepts and continually trying to pull from your memory and form those connections, you're going to be better and better at it as you go along. So the more you do it, the better it gets. And from there, you can really get the sort of mastery. So quizzing yourself is a really great way of really solidifying the knowledge that you're getting, and also ensuring that you're able to retain it for longer as well. So spending time with flashcards, quizzing yourself over a long period of time, those are methods that will always help you retain information for a little bit longer. And so we've discussed basically 3 scientifically backed ways to pick up new skills and learn new things. The first one is chunking. Chunking is really helpful because it breaks these bigger pieces of information down into tiny bite-sized chunks. From those, you can really build those neural connections until those chunks become bigger and bigger, and they become seamless, where you don't really notice that they're chunks anymore. The next thing that we talked about was process-centric work. Process-centric work is basically saying that you're focusing on spending time towards a goal rather than focusing on completing a goal. Because once you shift your mind from, oh, I need to get this thing done, to I need to spend like all my focus and dedication for the next 25 minutes on this subject, you're able to avoid activating, the pain centers in your brain, which tends to lead you down the path of procrastination. And another thing we talked about as well was the Pomodoro technique, specifically, is a good way of tapping into that. The third thing we talked about was active recall. Basically, once you learn something, try to teach someone else it without referring to any kind of external help, and maybe try to make flashcards or use a software like Anki to test yourself on the things that you're learning. And that can really go a long way towards making the information stick. And thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Now, if someone were to ask me for my phone number, maybe I'm at the bar and she's kind of cute